If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that sounds made up until it happens to you. My name is Cynthia Bellamy, and 2 months ago, I was a 67-year-old widow with nothing but 2 suitcases and $200 to my name. Today, I'm sitting in a house worth $2.3 million with a bank account that would make your head spin and a daughter who's serving 18 months in federal prison. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all started, to the moment when my supposedly loving daughter looked me in the eye and said, "Find somewhere else to die, Mother. You're useless now." That was 3 months ago. And honey, if you think you know how this story ends, you're in for one hell of a ride. 2 months earlier, the call came at 2:47 in the morning. That's burned into my memory because I was staring at the clock when my phone lit up, trying to convince myself that the strange silence from Richard's side of the bed was just my imagination. It wasn't. My husband of 43 years had suffered a massive stroke in his sleep. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was already gone. Just like that. One moment, the man I'd built my entire adult life around was there. The next, he wasn't. They say that death comes in threes. First, there's the physical death, the moment the heart stops. Then there's the social death, the funeral, the condolences, the casseroles from neighbors who don't know what else to do. But the third death, that's the one nobody talks about. That's when the world finally forgets you existed at all. I thought Richard's death was the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. The funeral was beautiful, I suppose, if you're into that sort of thing. Our daughter Rosamond handled everything. The flowers, the service, the reception at Oakwood Country Club, where Richard had played golf every Saturday for 20 years. She was magnificent, really. Poised, elegant, fielding condolences with the grace of a seasoned diplomat. "Mom's holding up as well as can be expected," she told everyone, her hand resting protectively on my shoulder. "We're just taking it day by day. I should have paid more attention to that hand on my shoulder, should have noticed how it felt less like comfort and more like control. But grief has a way of making you blind to everything except the pain. Rosamond had always been Richard's daughter more than mine, not in the sense that she looked like him, though she did, with those same sharp cheekbones and calculating gray eyes, but in temperament. Richard had been a businessman through and through, strategic, always thinking 3 moves ahead, always aware of the bottom line. I was the wife who made sure there were fresh flowers in the foyer and pot roast on Sundays. The woman who volunteered at the library and hosted dinner parties where I smiled and nodded while Richard and his colleagues talked about market trends and investment portfolios. "Cynthia doesn't trouble herself with all that financial stuff," Richard would say, not unkindly. "She's got more important things to worry about." What he meant was, she's not capable of understanding. And maybe I believed him. Maybe after 43 years of being told I didn't need to worry my pretty head about money, I'd started to believe I couldn't. That was mistake number 1. The first 2 weeks after the funeral passed in a blur of thank you cards and lawyers' letters and the strange, hollow silence of a house that suddenly felt too big. I'd moved into the guest room because I couldn't bear to sleep in the bed Richard and I had shared, couldn't bear to pack up his clothes or clear out his study or do any of the 1,000 small tasks that would make his absence permanent. Rosamond came by often during those weeks, always with her husband Carter in tow, a tall, handsome investment banker with perfect teeth and a handshake that lasted exactly 3 seconds. Not 2, not 4. 3. Like everything in Carter's life, it was calculated. "Mom, we need to talk about the house," Rosamond said one afternoon, settling herself at my kitchen table like she owned the place, which I suppose she thought she did. "What about it?" I asked, pouring tea from the pot Richard had brought back from a business trip to England 15 years ago. "It's just so big. All these stairs, all this maintenance. Dad's gone now and you're here all alone." She let the sentence trail off, her voice dripping with what I thought was concern. Carter jumped in, smooth as silk. "What Rosamond means is that we're worried about you, Margaret. This house is a lot to manage for one person. Have you thought about downsizing? Maybe something more manageable? One of those nice senior communities?" Senior communities. He said it like he was recommending a luxury resort, not a warehouse where they store old people until they die. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but this is my home. Richard and I built our life here. I'm not ready to leave. Rosamond exchanged a look with Carter. Just a flicker, there and gone, but I saw it. Of course, she said, reaching across to pat my hand. We just want you to be happy, Mom, and safe. Safe. That word would come back to haunt me. They started showing up more frequently after that. Always during dinner time, always with glossy brochures for active adult communities and elegant senior living solutions. Places with names like Sunset Gardens and Golden Years Estates, as if calling it something pretty would make you forget you were signing away your independence. Just think about it, Mom, Rosamond would say, leaving another brochure on the counter. No more worrying about property taxes or roof repairs or any of that. But here's the thing about worry. It gives you something to do, something to focus on besides the gaping hole in your life where a husband used to be. I didn't want to give up my worries. They were all I had left. 6 weeks after Richard's funeral, Rosamond brought up the will. We were sitting in the living room, the formal one that Richard had insisted we keep pristine for guests, though we rarely had any. Rosamond perched on the edge of the cream-colored sofa, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. Mom, we need to discuss Dad's estate. My heart started beating faster. Of course, Harrison Fitzgerald said he'd be calling me soon to schedule the reading of the will. There's already been a reading. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples of confusion through my mind. What? When? 2 weeks ago. Harrison called me. You were having such a hard time, Mom. You couldn't get out of bed some days. I didn't want to burden you with legal proceedings and all that complicated financial stuff. So I told Harrison I'd handle it and make sure you received your inheritance. Something cold unfurled in my stomach. Rosamond, I would have wanted to be there. Richard was my husband. That was my right. I know, Mom, I know. But I was trying to protect you. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a folder. Legal-sized documents, official-looking seals. I brought you a copy of everything. She spread the papers on the coffee table. My eyes scanned the words, but they didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Hereby bequeath to my daughter, Rosamond Bellamy Hayes, the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to... There must be some mistake, I whispered. Rosamond's face was sympathetic, almost convincingly so. I know this is hard to understand, Mom, but Dad wanted someone who really understood money to manage his legacy. He knew you'd never been interested in all that financial stuff. He was protecting you from the burden. But the house, this house, we bought it together. The house is part of the estate, Mom. It's mine now. Well, mine and Carter's. The room was spinning. Or maybe I was spinning and the room was still. I couldn't tell anymore. Where am I supposed to go? For just a second, just the briefest flash, Rosamond's mask slipped. I saw something cold underneath, something that had been waiting there all along. There's a lovely facility on Maple Street, Maple Grove Senior Living. Very affordable. They have openings. She paused, then added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I've been generous letting you stay here this long, but Carter got his promotion. We need to move into town immediately. This house is perfect for our family. Our family. Not my family anymore. Our family. Hers and Carter's and their 2 perfect children who I saw maybe 4 times a year. How long do I have? The words came out smaller than I intended. We'd like you out by the weekend. That gives you 3 days. Should be plenty of time to pack up your personal items. 3 days. 43 years reduced to 3 days. I spent those 3 days like a ghost in my own home, packing my life into 2 suitcases and 1 cardboard box. 43 years of marriage, and it all fit into 2 suitcases and a box. Rosamond watched from the doorway of the master bedroom, her bedroom now, checking her phone while I folded clothes with shaking hands. You know, there's really not much point in taking all that, she said, gesturing at a stack of photo albums. Where you're going, you won't have room for clutter. Clutter. Our wedding album was clutter. Pictures of her as a baby, gap-toothed at 6, graduating high school. All clutter. I'll make room, I said quietly. She sighed, the kind of sigh that says I'm dealing with a difficult child. Mom, I'm just trying to help you be practical. Practical. The word tasted like ashes in my mouth. On Saturday morning, Carter loaded my suitcases into the trunk of their BMW with the efficiency of someone taking out the trash. Rosamond stood on the front porch of my house, her house now, wearing expensive athleisure and oversized sunglasses. You'll love having your independence again, Margaret, Carter said, not quite meeting my eyes. No more worrying about maintenance, property taxes, any of that headache stuff. No more home, he meant. I climbed into the back seat, the guest position in the car, and watched as we pulled away from 847 Oakwood Drive, the house where I'd hosted 43 Thanksgiving dinners, where I'd nursed Richard through pneumonia and celebrated Rosamond's acceptance to Yale, where I'd lived my entire adult life. We drove in silence for 20 minutes, and with each mile, something inside me was changing, hardening, waking up. The Sunset Inn was exactly what you'd expect from a place charging $49 a night. Peeling paint, a flickering neon sign, and a parking lot that smelled like cigarettes and desperation. This was where my daughter thought I should spend my remaining years. Rosamond handed me an envelope. Inside was 220s. This should cover you for a few days while you get settled, she said brightly, like she was tipping a helpful bellhop. I'll have Carter transfer some money into your account once we sort through all of Dad's paperwork. Some money? From my own inheritance? She kissed my cheek, a quick perfunctory peck, and walked back to the car where Carter was waiting. They drove away without looking back. I stood in that parking lot, clutching my 2 suitcases and my box of photos, and watched the BMW disappear around the corner. And that's when I heard it. Richard's voice in my memory, clear as day. Cynthia, everything I built, it's all for you. Promise me you'll be strong. That was 6 months ago. He'd called me into his study one evening, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Tired, almost fragile. What brought this on? I'd asked. Just promise me, he'd said, gripping my hand. Promise me you'll be strong, stronger than you think you can be. I'd promised, because you promise things to the person you love, even when you don't understand why. Standing in that motel parking lot, I finally understood. Richard had known. Somehow, some way, he'd known exactly what Rosamond would do. The motel room was as depressing as you'd imagine. Thin walls broadcasting someone's late-night TV habits. Thinner towels that scratched more than dried. A mattress that sagged in the middle like a hammock. I sat on the edge of that sad excuse for a bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling. I could give up now. Except that this was my life. Find a job, though who hires 67-year-old women with no recent work experience? Apply for assistance. Move into that affordable senior facility Rosamond had mentioned. Spend my remaining years in a single room, eating cafeteria food, waiting to die. Or... I pulled out my phone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. That was new. The search was simple. Harrison Fitzgerald, Attorney, Oakland. His office appeared immediately. Fitzgerald and Associates, downtown. Office hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. It was Saturday night. I'd have to wait until Monday. But that was okay. Because somewhere between being told to find somewhere to die and sitting in this godforsaken motel room, something had shifted inside me. The obedient wife was gone. The doormat mother had left the building. What remained was a woman who'd spent 43 years being told she didn't understand money, didn't need to worry, shouldn't trouble herself with complicated things. That woman was about to find out exactly what her supposedly simple mind could accomplish. I had 2 days to wait, 2 days to plan, 2 days to remember every single time Richard had said, "The will is very clear, Cynthia. You'll be taken care of." Rosamond had made one critical mistake. Just one. She'd underestimated me. Monday morning came with the kind of crystal clear sunshine that feels like an insult when your life is falling apart. I stood outside the Sunset Inn at 7:30 a.m., waiting for the bus that would take me downtown. I'd counted my money 3 times. After paying for 2 nights at the motel, I had $102 left. The bus fare was $2.50 each way. The arithmetic of poverty. It's amazing how quickly you learn it. The bus was mostly empty. A few shift workers heading home, a couple of students with their heads buried in their phones. I sat near the back, clutching my purse like someone might try to snatch it. Maybe someone would. I'd never ridden public transportation before. Richard had always driven me everywhere, or I'd used our second car. Our car. Rosamond's car now. The bus lurched and swayed through morning traffic, and with each stop I felt myself changing. The woman who'd gotten on at the Sunset Inn wasn't quite the same woman who'd stand up to get off downtown. Necessity does that to you. It strips away everything you thought you needed and shows you what you're actually made of. Turns out, I was made of something stronger than anyone, including me, had realized. Fitzgerald and Associates occupied the 5th floor of a historic building downtown, the kind with marble floors and brass fixtures that whisper old money. I stood in the lobby for a full minute before pressing the elevator button, suddenly aware of how I must look. My clothes were 3 days old, hastily grabbed when I packed. My hair needed washing. I probably smelled like cheap motel soap in desperation, but I pressed that button anyway. The receptionist was young enough to be my granddaughter, with perfect makeup and a smile that probably came from a training manual. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I need to see Harrison Fitzgerald. It's about my husband's estate, Richard Bellamy." Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe. "One moment, please." She disappeared down a hallway, and I stood there in that elegant waiting room, feeling like an imposter, like someone who didn't belong. That was the old Cynthia thinking. The new Cynthia was learning that belonging is something you claim, not something you wait to be granted. "Mrs. Bellamy!" Harrison Fitzgerald emerged from the hallway, and the shock on his face was almost comical. He was in his mid-70s, distinguished in that way that men with money and education often are. Silver hair, perfectly trimmed. Suit that cost more than my current net worth, but with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Those kind eyes were currently filled with confusion. "My dear, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I called your house at least a dozen times, but Rosamond said you were traveling." "Europe," she mentioned, taking time to grieve. My stomach dropped like a stone. "Europe?" "Yes. She said you'd gone to visit some old friends in France, that you needed time away from everything." He studied my face, and I watched understanding dawn in his expression. "Cynthia, you haven't been to France, have you?" "Harrison, I've been living in a motel room that costs $49 a night. My daughter told me I inherited nothing. She evicted me from my own home 3 days ago." The color drained from his face. "That's impossible. You own that house. He stopped, looked around the waiting room where the receptionist was trying very hard not to stare. "Come with me, right now." Harrison's office was exactly what you'd expect from a lawyer who'd been practicing for 50 years. Dark wood, leather chairs that actually supported your back, and walls lined with legal books that probably hadn't been opened since before the internet. He closed the door with a soft click and gestured to a chair. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." So I did. The funeral, Rosamond's increasing pressure about the house, the document she'd shown me claiming she inherited everything, the eviction, the 200 on all of it. Harrison's face grew darker with each sentence. When I finished, he was gripping his desk so hard his knuckles were white. "There was a will reading," he said carefully. 6 weeks ago. Rosamond told me you were too distraught to attend, that you'd asked her to handle everything and make sure you received your inheritance. I gave her the original in 3 copies. I was never told about any reading." "Dear God." He stood up, began pacing. "Cynthia, what Rosamond has done, this is fraud, elder abuse. These are federal crimes." But she had documents, legal documents with a Richard signature, forged most likely, or possibly an old draft from years ago that she presented as current. He stopped pacing, looked at me directly. "Your husband updated his will 6 months before his death. I need to show you what it actually says." He pulled a thick folder from his filing cabinet. The document inside had Richard's signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized. I recognized the date, March 15th, 3 weeks before Richard called me into his study and made me promise to be strong. "Read it," Harrison said gently. My hands shook as I picked up the pages. "I, Richard James Bellamy, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Cynthia Ann Bellamy, the following—" The words blurred through my tears, but I forced myself to focus. "Our primary residence at 847 Oakwood Drive, including all furnishings and personal effects." The house. He'd left me the house. 70% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts, totaling approximately $23 million. $23 million. I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. "Keep reading," Harrison said quietly. "The next part is important. To my daughter, Rosamond Bellamy Hayes, I leave $10 million to be held in trust. Distribution to begin on her 45th birthday, contingent upon her treatment of her mother following my death." I looked up at Harrison. "Contingent?" "Keep reading. The trustee, Harrison Fitzgerald, shall have full discretion to evaluate whether Rosamond has demonstrated care, respect, and dignity toward Cynthia Bellamy following my death. If the trustee determines that Rosamond has failed in this regard, the entirety of her inheritance shall revert to Cynthia instead." The words swam on the page. I read them again and again. "Harrison, what exactly is this saying?" He sat down across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "It's saying that your husband knew there was a possibility, maybe even a likelihood, that Rosamond would do exactly what she did, and he built in protection for you. But why? Why would he think, because he knew his daughter Cynthia, better than you did perhaps, better than she knew herself?" Harrison stood and walked to his window, looking out over the city. "Richard came to see me about 8 months before he died. Said he needed to make some changes to his will. I asked him why, and he told me something I'll never forget. He turned back to face me. He said, 'Harrison, I spent 43 years building wealth. I was so focused on building it that I forgot to teach my daughter what it actually means. I taught her to want success, but not how to value people. And now I'm terrified of what she might do to Cynthia when I'm gone.' My vision blurred with tears. All those years, Richard had doted on Rosamond, praised her accomplishments, supported her ambitions, and underneath it all, he'd been worried. Watching, preparing. "There's more," Harrison said gently. "Richard also recorded a video message, to be played only if Rosamond contested the will or if there was evidence she'd mistreated you. He made a video. He wanted to explain his reasoning, in his own words." Harrison paused. "Do you want to see it?" Did I? Did I want to hear my dead husband explain why he'd predicted our daughter would throw me away like garbage? "Yes," I whispered. Harrison pulled up the video on his computer and turned the screen toward me. And there was Richard, sitting in this very office, wearing the blue shirt I'd bought him for Christmas 2 years ago, looking tired but determined. "If you're watching this, Cynthia," his recorded voice said, "then I'm gone. And something has happened that made you need to see this." I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying not to sob. "I need to explain something, my dear. Something I should have explained while I was alive, but I was too much of a coward." He looked down, collecting himself. "I wasn't always a good man. When I started my business, I made choices, hard choices. I stepped on people to get ahead. I justified it as just business. But the truth is, I was ruthless. This was news to me. Richard had always presented himself as a self-made success, but with integrity. And I see that same ruthlessness in Rosamond," he continued, "that same hunger, that same willingness to prioritize success over people. I gave her that. It's my fault, my legacy, and I'm terrified she'll use it against you." Richard leaned forward, his eyes intense even through the screen. "You deserved better than me, Cynthia. You sacrificed your dreams, your education, your independence to support my ambitions. You worked part-time jobs to help pay for Rosamond's college while I built my company. You postponed everything you wanted to be what you thought we needed. I was crying openly now. So I structured my will to protect you, and to test Rosamond, to give her a chance to prove she's better than her worst impulses, better than I was at her age. He paused. If she passes that test, she gets her inheritance at 45. If she doesn't, he looked directly into the camera, then she's shown you exactly who she is, and you need to believe her. The video ended. Richard's face froze on the screen, and then it went dark. I sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything. Richard had known. He'd known and tried to protect me, even from beyond the grave. There's one more thing you need to understand, Harrison said carefully. By evicting you from your home and lying about your inheritance, Rosamond hasn't just violated the terms of Richard's will. She's triggered the reversion clause. Her $10 million now belongs to you. I stared at him. What? You don't inherit $23 million, Cynthia. You inherit $33 million, plus the house, plus all personal property. Rosamond gets nothing. The irony was so perfect it was almost funny. Rosamond had been so desperate to claim her inheritance that she'd lost it entirely. In trying to take everything, she'd ended up with nothing. What do I do now? I asked. Harrison smiled, a cold, professional smile that promised justice. Now, my dear, we call the police, and then we call your daughter and inform her that she's about to receive the shock of her life. Detective James Rodriguez was a stocky man in his 40s with intelligent eyes and a wedding ring worn thin from years of wear. He listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes in a small leather notebook. Mrs. Bellamy, do you still have the documents your daughter showed you, the forged will? No. She took them with her when she left. That's okay. We can work with that. He turned to Harrison. You have copies of the legitimate will? Multiple copies, all properly witnessed and notarized. And the video testimony from Mr. Bellamy. Rodriguez nodded. We'll need to bring in a forensic document examiner, but based on what you've told me, this is clearly fraud. Possibly conspiracy if her husband was involved. And given the amount of money and the victim's age, we're looking at federal charges. Federal charges. My daughter was going to face federal charges. Part of me, the mother part, wanted to stop this, to protect her, like I always had. But another part, the part that had been sleeping for 43 years and was only now waking up, remembered her words. Find somewhere else to die. What happens next? I asked. We start by freezing all of Mr. Bellamy's accounts pending investigation. That'll get your daughter's attention fast. Then we execute a warrant for any documents she has related to the estate. And depending on what we find... Rodriguez looked at me seriously. Are you prepared to press charges against your own daughter, Mrs. Bellamy? Was I? I thought about sitting in that motel room, about the $200 handed to me like a tip, about 43 years of marriage reduced to 2 suitcases and a box. Yes, I said firmly. I am. Harrison made 3 phone calls from his office phone, his voice crisp and authoritative. By the time he hung up from the 3rd call, he looked satisfied. All accounts frozen. Every single one. Rosamond's credit cards, checking accounts, anything tied to your late husband's assets, all frozen pending the investigation. How long before she finds out? Harrison checked his watch. Given that it's Monday afternoon and she's probably already tried to use a card, I'd say about... My phone rang. Rosamond's name flashed on the screen. Harrison and Detective Rodriguez both leaned forward. Answer it, Rodriguez said, and keep her talking. I took a breath and answered. Hello, Rosamond. Mom, her voice was tight, stressed. Mom, where are you? Something's wrong with the bank accounts. They're saying everything is frozen. There must be some kind of mistake. I'm sitting in Harrison Fitzgerald's office. You remember Harrison? Dad's actual attorney? Silence. Long, heavy silence. Mom, I don't know what you think you discovered, but I discovered that you're a liar. My voice was steady, calm, almost frighteningly so. I discovered that you forged legal documents, I discovered that you committed fraud and threw your 67-year-old mother out of her own house because you thought I was too stupid to check. That's not— Mom, please, you're confused. The grief has been overwhelming, and someone is obviously taking advantage of your emotional state. The audacity. Even caught red-handed, she was trying to gaslight me. Detective Rodriguez is sitting right here, sweetheart. Would you like to discuss your confusion with him? I could hear her breathing. Fast, panicked. And Rosamond? That $10 million Dad left you? The contingency clause activated the moment you told me to find somewhere to die. It's mine now. All of it. That's impossible. Harrison's reading the will right now if you'd like to hear it. Or you can wait and read it in court. Your choice. More silence. Then quietly, desperately. Mom, please, can we meet somewhere? Talk about this reasonably? I'm sure we can work something out. Oh, we'll definitely be meeting at the courthouse when you're arraigned. You wouldn't dare press charges against your own daughter. Think about the grandchildren. That was the wrong thing to say. The absolute wrong thing. I am thinking about them, Rosamond. I'm thinking they deserve to see what happens when you betray the people who love you. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from power I'd forgotten I had. Harrison was beaming at me like a proud father. Cynthia Bellamy. That was magnificent. Detective Rodriguez was grinning too. We got everything we needed. I'll have a warrant issued within the hour. She'll be picked up this evening. What about Carter? I asked. His name is all over the financial documents. We'll be investigating his involvement. If he helped create those forgeries, he's going down too. I should have felt guilty. Should have felt like a terrible mother. But all I felt was a cold, crystalline clarity. For 43 years, I'd been told I didn't understand complicated things, that I needed protection from harsh realities, that I was too delicate, too simple, too female to handle big decisions. Turned out, I understood perfectly, and I was about to show everyone exactly how well I could handle things. They arrested Rosamond at 8:47 p.m. I wasn't there. Harrison thought it best that I keep my distance, but Detective Rodriguez called me with the details. She'd been having dinner at Leonardi's, that expensive Italian place downtown, apparently celebrating her inheritance with Carter and another couple. The detective said she screamed about false arrest, demanded her lawyer, made a scene that ensured everyone in that restaurant would remember her face. Carter was arrested the next morning at his office. Apparently, a forensic accountant had traced the forged documents to a printing company Carter's firm used for creating investment prospectuses. My son-in-law had quite the side business in document fraud. I spent that first night back in my house, sleeping in the master bedroom for the first time since Richard died. Rosamond had already moved her belongings in, replacing Richard's careful organization with an explosion of designer clothes and expensive cosmetics. I packed it all into garbage bags and left them on the front porch. She could collect them when she made bail. The house felt different now, not because Richard was gone, but because I was finally seeing it as mine. For decades, I'd maintained it as Richard's sanctuary, designed around his preferences, his needs, his vision of how we should live. Tomorrow, I thought, I'd start making some changes. But tonight, I stood in my bedroom, finally, truly mine, and looked at myself in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the one who'd gotten on a bus downtown this morning. She was harder, stronger, clearer. She looked like someone who'd stopped apologizing for taking up space in her own life. She looked like someone who'd just declared war. And honey, the war was just beginning. Patricia Hayes arrived at my door 3 days after her son's arrest, dressed in Chanel and radiating the kind of entitlement that comes from 3 generations of inherited wealth. She didn't knock, just rang the doorbell like she was summoning a servant. I took my time answering. Cynthia. She didn't wait for an invitation, just swept past me into the foyer. We need to discuss this situation rationally. Hello, Patricia. Would you like some tea? She waved off the offer impatiently. Carter made some poor choices, obviously, but prosecuting him seems rather vindictive, don't you think? He has a career, children, a reputation to maintain. I closed the door slowly, deliberately. Your son helped steal my inheritance and threw me out of my own house. With respect, Patricia, his reputation should be the least of anyone's concerns." Her eyes narrowed. Carter was following Rosamond's lead. He didn't understand the full situation. "Surely you can see this is really all her fault." The audacity was almost impressive. Blame the woman, protect the man. Some songs never change their tune. "Patricia, Carter created forged legal documents. That's not following someone's lead. That's conspiracy to commit fraud." She settled herself on my sofa, uninvited, and crossed her legs with practiced elegance. "My lawyers believe we can reach a settlement that benefits everyone. You get your house back. Rosamond faces appropriate consequences for her misjudgment. And Carter avoids the publicity of a trial that would devastate his career and hurt the grandchildren." Ah, there it was, the grandchildren card. As if I hadn't been thinking about Lily and James every single day. "What kind of settlement?" Patricia smiled, clearly believing she'd found an opening. "Carter's family is prepared to compensate you for your inconvenience. Let's say $5 million. In exchange for dropping all charges against Carter. $5 million to forgive the man who'd helped steal $33 million from me." "That's generous," I said carefully. "It is. Very generous. Considering—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Considering that Carter's legal team has found some interesting information about your late husband's business practices." My blood went cold. "What kind of information?" "The kind that might make you reconsider who the real criminal was in this situation." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "I'll give you 48 hours to think about it. But Cynthia, if this goes to trial, those business records become public. Every questionable transaction, every suspicious payment, all of it." After she left, I stood in my foyer, hand pressed against the wall to steady myself, because I knew exactly what Patricia was talking about. I'd found them 2 nights ago, going through Richard's home office, payments to shell companies, consulting fees with no documentation, transactions that looked legitimate on the surface but felt wrong underneath. I'd tried to convince myself there was an explanation, that Richard wouldn't have been involved in anything illegal. But now Patricia's threat confirmed my worst fear. My husband hadn't been the man I thought he was. I called Harrison immediately. Within an hour, he'd brought in Rebecca Stone, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked at Richard's records with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining an X-ray. "Mrs. Bellamy," she said after 6 hours of review, "your husband was involved in money laundering. We're talking millions of dollars over at least a decade." The room spun. "That's impossible. Richard was meticulous about following the law. That's actually what's interesting." Rebecca pulled out a spreadsheet. "The money flow is documented with unusual precision, almost like someone who knew they were being watched, or who wanted a paper trail." "I don't understand." Harrison leaned forward. "Rebecca, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that legitimate money launderers don't usually keep records this detailed. They obscure the trail, make it hard to follow. But your husband's records? They're almost educational, like someone documenting everything for a reason." "What reason?" "I don't know yet, but I think we need to contact the FBI. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh met me at a federal building downtown. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of a high school principal. "Mrs. Bellamy, thank you for coming forward voluntarily." I spread Richard's records across the table between us. "My daughter and son-in-law are threatening to expose my husband's criminal activities if I don't drop charges against them. I want to know the truth, whatever it costs." Jennifer studied the documents for a long moment. Then she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Bellamy, what I'm about to tell you is classified information. But given the circumstances, you have a right to know." She paused. "Your husband was working for us." The world tilted sideways. "What?" "Richard Bellamy was a federal informant. For 8 years, he provided information about the Torino crime family's money laundering operations while maintaining his cover as a facilitator." I couldn't process this, couldn't make it make sense. "Richard was Working for the FBI? We approached him 9 years ago when we noticed irregularities in his business. He'd gotten involved with some dangerous people early in his career, made choices he regretted. We gave him an option, cooperation or prosecution. He chose cooperation. Memories flickered through my mind like a film reel. Richard coming home late, stressed, looking over his shoulder in parking lots. That time he made me promise to be strong. The updated will 6 months before his death. Why didn't he tell me? For your protection. If the Torino suspected you knew anything, you would have become a target. Jennifer pulled out a thick file. Every report he filed mentioned you. His motivation was always the same. I want to leave my wife clean money. Money she can be proud of. Tears burned behind my eyes. So the $33 million is completely legitimate. Compensation for 8 years of cooperation and risk. Your husband's information led to 47 arrests and the seizure of over $200 million in criminal assets. Richard hadn't been a criminal. He'd been trying to make things right, and I'd never known. There's one problem, Jennifer continued. Rosamond and Carter don't know this. They think they're sitting on information about criminal money laundering. If they leak that information, it could compromise ongoing investigations. What do you need from me? Jennifer's expression was grim. We need to control the narrative, and we need your help to do it. Would you be willing to wear a wire? That evening, Rosamond and Carter sat in my living room, confident they held all the cards. Rosamond had made bail. Patricia had mortgaged her own house to cover it, and she looked haggard but determined. The recording device felt heavy against my chest, hidden under my cardigan. Mom, Rosamond started, her voice carefully modulated. We want to move forward from this. All of us. Carter spread documents across my coffee table. We've structured a very favorable agreement. You keep the house, $5 million in assets, and immunity from any questions about Richard's business practices. And you two? We all move forward. The past stays buried. The family heals. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. And for the first time I saw past the polished exterior to the scared, angry child underneath. Let me ask you something, Rosamond. When did you decide to betray me? Was it before Dad died, or after? I never betrayed you. Stop lying! The words came out sharper than I intended. For once in your life, tell me the truth. When did you decide your mother was disposable? Something in Rosamond cracked. Her perfect composure fractured, and underneath was raw pain I'd never seen before. You want the truth? Her voice broke. Fine. I decided when I was 12 years old. 12? I won a state science fair. First place. I was so excited I ran all the way home to tell Dad. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He was on a business call. Told me that's nice, honey, without even looking up. And you made excuses for him, like you always did. Your father's so proud. He just has trouble showing it. My heart clenched. I remembered that day. Remembered smoothing things over, like I always did. I spent my whole life competing for scraps of his attention, Rosamond continued, her voice raw. Achieving, performing, being perfect. And it was never enough. But you didn't have to do anything. You just had to exist, and he loved you, completely. Unconditionally. So yes, Mom, when Dad died, I finally saw a chance to win, to be the one who mattered, to not be invisible anymore. The pain in her voice was real, ancient, a wound that had festered for decades. Rosamond, I never knew. Of course you didn't. You were too busy being the perfect wife. The FBI agents entered then, swift and professional. Jennifer Walsh showed her badge. Rosamond Bellamy Hayes, Carter Hayes, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted extortion of a federal witness. Rosamond stared at me, her face crumpling with betrayal. You recorded us? You gave me no choice. As they handcuffed her, Rosamond looked at me with something like understanding. He loved you more, even from the grave, didn't he? I stepped forward, my own tears falling now. He loved you too, Rosamond. Imperfectly, inadequately, but he loved you, and he gave you a chance to be better than your worst impulses. You chose to prove his fears right instead. The sentencing hearing came 6 weeks later. Judge Miranda Chen was a stern woman in her 60s who looked like she'd heard every excuse and believed none of them. Rosamond Bellamy Hayes, you are sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years supervised release. Carter Hayes, 24 months in federal prison, 3 years supervised release, and permanent revocation of your securities licenses. Rosamond didn't cry, just stood there, straight-backed, accepting her fate. I attended the hearing. Harrison thought I shouldn't, but I needed to be there, needed to see this through. That evening, alone in Richard's study, my study now, I found it. A second letter, hidden in a false bottom of his desk drawer. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting unmistakably his. P.S. Cynthia, if you found this, then my fears about Rosamond came true. I'm sorry you had to face that pain, but I have a confession. The flaw I saw in Rosamond, I saw it because I recognized it. She got it from me. I spent my life trying to be better than my worst impulses. I didn't always succeed, but loving you made me want to try. Give Rosamond the same chance I got, the chance to become better than her worst self. Not because she deserves it, but because second chances are how broken people become whole. I never told you this. I'm proud of who you are. Not who you were for me, but who you always were underneath. Be that person now. She's magnificent. R. I sat there crying, laughing, furious at this man who'd seen everything so clearly and said so little while he was alive. 8 months later, I visited Rosamond at the Federal Correctional Facility. The visiting room smelled like industrial cleaner and regret. Rosamond looked different, humbled, real in a way she'd never been before. You keep coming, she said softly. Did you think I wouldn't? I told you to die. And I refused. Seems to be a pattern with me now. A ghost of a smile crossed her face, the first genuine one I'd seen in years. Your father left me another letter, I said. He asked me to give you a second chance, because he needed one too. Rosamond's eyes filled with tears. Why? Because he saw himself in you, the capacity for both terrible choices and redemption. We sat in silence for a moment, not comfortable, but honest. I'm not promising we'll have the relationship we had before, I said carefully. That relationship was broken, built on my silence and your resentment. But maybe we can build something new, something honest. I'd like that, Rosamond whispered. Someday. I stood to leave, shouldered my purse. Mom, Rosamond's voice stopped me. Thank you for not disappearing. I smiled. I'm done disappearing. 6 months after that, I stood in my art studio, the room that used to be Richard's den, putting finishing touches on a painting. It was a self-portrait, a woman standing in bright sunlight, her face turned toward the future. The Margaret Bellamy Foundation was thriving. $15 million dedicated to providing legal aid for seniors facing family financial abuse. We'd helped 43 people so far, 43 lives saved, the same number of years I'd been married. My phone rang. Dr. Lauren Mitchell, my financial advisor, calling about the documentary deal. Netflix wanted to tell my story. The proceeds would fund scholarships for women returning to education after raising families. Women who, like me, had postponed their dreams for everyone else. Through the window, I could see the garden I'd replanted. Richard's formal rose beds replaced with wildflowers and vegetables. My choices. My design. The woman who'd been told to find somewhere to die had instead found somewhere to live. Really live. For the first time in 67 years. People say revenge is a dish best served cold, but this wasn't revenge. This was resurrection. Richard had given me money. Rosamond had given me reason to use it, and I'd given myself permission to finally become whole. The woman I was told to be died in that motel room. The woman I am was born the day I decided to fight back. And honey, she's just getting started.